The Brothers Karamazov, Book 3, Chapter 4. In Book 3, Chapter 3, Dmitri and Alyosha meet in a darkened alley on the way to Katerina Ivanova's house, somewhat near their father's garden. Dmitri is a little bit drunk, and he's begun to confess his spiritual, emotional struggles within himself. On the one hand, he wants to be sensual and deviant and follow the fleshly passions of his nature. He wants to love the earth and everything that the earth can give as far as pleasure, but yet he wants a clean conscience. He doesn't want guilt or shame. Now he's going to tell the story of the particular occasion that is bringing out this struggle. And that story, of course, is the history of his time away from Alyosha and his time with Katerina Ivanova. And so he begins this story and begins chapter 4, talking just for a second about what he was like before he met Katerina Ivanova, and that is that he was a playboy, a sensualist, an Epicurean, following only his most base desires. And then he pauses because he realizes who he's speaking to. And yes, Christian love is effective and effectual and non-judgmental, but he remembers that this is the very sexually uncomfortable, sexually naive, sexually inexperienced Alyosha, and he's wondering, I haven't even started the story really, and you're already blushing. And Alyosha explains his blushing. He's not blushing because he's clutching his pearls and saying, "Oh me, oh my, this is R-rated and I wasn't prepared for that." No, Alyosha's saying, "I'm shuddering because I'm the same as you." And Dimitri's basically responds by saying, Get over yourself. You're not the same as me. What do you mean? What's this false humility, the same as me?" And Alyosha explains what he means, what Christian humility is. No, I'm not at the same level of you in your sensuality, but I'm on the same ladder of your sensuality, and I'm on the first rung. And maybe you're rungs and rungs above me, but the point is, once you're on the ladder, you're going to eventually get there. And so when Alyosha hears of Dimitri's lustful life, he doesn't think, "Oh, how could Dmitri live like that? I'm so much better of a person than he is." No, Alyosha thinks the opposite. When he hears about Dmitri's lustful life, he sees himself in his brother. And so Dmitri is convinced by that Alyosha is sincere in his blushing, not in a judgmental way, but in a self-aware, humble way. So now Dmitri, with that background, he says, "Well, now let me tell you about what's really going on in my history." So I wasn't happy as someone pursuing my most base desires, and so I found myself in the employ of a colonel. And this colonel was all in all a good guy, but he had some conflict with me. We were in a town, and the townspeople, though they didn't agree with me morally, boy, did they like me, and I became kind of the town son. And so the colonel didn't like me, even though he was a pretty good guy, but everyone in the town liked me, so it was very limited what the colonel could do to hurt me. So what do you do when an older man who is your boss doesn't like you? Well, you befriend his daughter from his first marriage, and her name is Agafia. And so Dmitri says that Agafia is quite attractive, the daughter of the colonel's first marriage, and he became really good friends and intimate, not sexually, but intimate as friends. And Dmitri is able to say things to her that only a close person would say to someone of the opposite gender, and he becomes fast friends with Agafia. Then word comes that the colonel's current wife and her daughter, who happens to be Katerina Ivanova, are coming to town, and everyone, the sister of the deceased wife and Agafia, think that Katerina Ivanova is just the second coming, that she is just the bee's knees, that she is this absolute awesome woman of virtue, and she's great, and everyone should bow down to her. And this immediately annoys Dmitri, and he doesn't like her from the get-go. Then she comes to this town and everyone's acting like she's the greatest thing, like she's part of the royal family, and everyone loves her. And that immediately makes Dmitri hate her, that everyone loves her. He sees her at a party and he intentionally makes no deal of her. He intentionally snubs her. Everyone else is coming and saying how beautiful and wonderful she is. And Dmitri doesn't play that, and so he intentionally snubs her. Well, she has to get everyone's attention, so Katerina Ivanova looks at Dmitri and makes a sneer at him. And so this seems to be not only the start of their so-called relationship, but it seems to be really the entirety of their relationship. Maybe the first one or two times I read the book, I don't think I really caught how overtly not in love the two of them are. I used to think that there was some real relationship, but Grushenka was just too much for Dmitri to handle. But if you read these the 3 chapters of Confession to Alyosha carefully, or maybe not even that carefully, you see that it's really more about competition and winning than it is actually any affection between the two of them. Anyway, Dmitri is annoyed by the presence and the stuck-up nature of Katerina Ivanova's arrival, and she is equally annoyed by Dmitri. At this time, just as luck would have it, as providence would have it, Fyodor has sent 6,000 rubles to Dmitri to kind of buy him off, to kind of get him to stop pursuing money from him, money owed from his mother, Adelaida. So it just so happens that while Dmitri is annoyed by Katerina Ivanova's arrival, he comes in to 6,000 rubles. Then Dmitri hears in a letter from a friend about the colonel's financial trouble. And what he hears is that the colonel, we're not told the details, but maybe it's some sort of tax thing or embezzling thing. But for whatever, however he went about this white-collar crime, he has 4,500 of the government's rubles in his account that are supposed to be in the government's account, and that this is going to burn him, that his chickens will come home to roost. And so what does Dmitri do? Well, he's friends, quote unquote, with the colonel's oldest daughter from his first marriage, Agafia. So he calls her and he's acting. Dmitri is acting like he's Agafia's friend. And he says, well, I know what's going to happen. Your dad's in financial trouble. I know you don't believe it. I know everything was all right the last time the general came to check on this issue, but it's not all right now. And I'm telling you right now that they're going to want this money from him and that he's not going to have it. And when that happens, when your dad gets in trouble, and when his 4,500 rubles are required of him, I want you to know this. I have the money, and I'll give you the money under one condition. That you send your stuck-up brat, pure, snotty, mean girl's sister, and you make her ask me for it. And Agafia now sees that there is a ruse. Now she gets it. Now she knows who Dmitri is. And she looks at him exactly like you would expect someone to look at Fyodor, and calls him a scoundrel, an absolute scoundrel, because she knows that she's been used this whole time, that it was never about loving her, that instead she's being used. So Agafia, not keeping the secret because she has no loyalty to Dmitri, she immediately goes home and tells Katerina Ivanova exactly what Dmitri is up to. But Dmitri says to Alyosha, as the narrator of this story, this anecdote, he says, well, that's exactly what I wanted her to do. I wanted Katerina Ivanovna to know of my scheme. And so he's so diabolical, so devious, that he doesn't even care that Katerina Ivanovna knows what he's up to try to get back at her. And remember, all she's done is had a good reputation and sneered at him at a party. That is the great sin that Katerina Ivanovna must atone for in Dmitri's mind. And so everything happens as Dmitri's friend wrote. The 4,500 rubles are asked of the colonel. He is in trouble, and it seems like he is embezzling or tax frauding or something, the money. And so he signs that he'll pay it back. And just to avoid the shame of that, he signs that he will pay it back, or that he does have it. And then he goes into a room and he's ready to commit suicide, shooting a gun with his toes. He gets all dressed and ready for suicide. But since Dmitri has told Agafia that this is the situation that will occur, she's quick to figure out the situation, to read the situation. So she runs in and saves her dad and prevents him from committing suicide. And she tells him what Dmitri said. Then other men rush in and restrain the colonel from committing suicide. So in one of the most sleazeball moves of all time, Dmitri says, I'm back at my place, and I'm putting on cologne, and I'm all soapy, and I'm running a comb through my hair, and I'm ready to get it on with Katerina Ivanovna. Then he looks up, and there she is in the doorway. So every part of Dmitri's diabolical plan, his Fyodor-esque plan, is working out perfectly. Everything that he wanted to happen is happening. Here is Katerina Ivanovna. He has won. The woman who has a good reputation, the colonel's daughter who sneered at him, now is in a completely vulnerable position. She's got really no options as a daughter who loves her father. She can let her father go to prison and be treated as a common criminal, or she can do whatever Dmitri says in order to obtain the money and save the shame and embarrassment of her father going from colonel to nobody in prison. Then she tries to act all hard and tough, and that the situation isn't what it is. But Dmitri says to Alyosha she can't really do it. She tries to put on the mask of being a tough girl, but it doesn't really work. She's quivering because she knows she's beat. She knows that her queen is completely trapped. No matter which way she moves, she's going to lose her queen. And Dmitri looks at her, and he knows that in a sense, winning will be losing. If he goes through with it, he'll have won, but in a sense, he'll have lost because she'll be the better person. So here we have now him deviating from the character of Fyodor. Everything in this chapter, Fyodor would have done and been proud of. And at this point, he would have gone through with it and gone through with his base motives and had made Katerina Ivanovna have sexual relations with him and probably been proud of it and talked all over town. And Dmitri reflects on the situation and says, no, this is terrible. She's gonna be better than me. So Dmitri's motives for not doing it aren't exactly Christian. It seems like he just wants to have some maybe not moral superiority, but not lose entirely on the whole morality contest. And so he can't do it. And he walks over to the freezing cold window and he puts his forehead on the freezing cold window. And at that moment, he loses his evil, spiteful heart. And he just goes over, grabs 5,000 rubles, hands it to her, says, here's the door, go. And in that way, he's sort of won morally, because he has Katerina in a morally defeated, morally compromising situation, and yet he's rejected her again. So he does, in essence, what he did the first time at the party. Every other young man is making a big deal out of you. I don't make any big deal out of you. now alone in his apartment. I can do anything I want, and he doesn't do it again. So now he holds the moral upper hand. And so that's how chapter 4 ends. And the previous two chapters, chapter 3 and now this chapter, have been Dmitri's confession to Alyosha, and the next chapter, the third chapter, book 3, chapter 5, will continue Dmitri's confession to Alyosha.